Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And we are back for the second episode of my Humphrey Bogart countdown and ranking, based on the 72 movies I've seen, the ones that it may be impossible to see, and other notable miscellaneous cameos, which I mentioned in the previous video. However, today we will be counting down from 70 to 61. Another 10. And of course, these are 10 I've actually all seen. So I will be able to go a little more in depth about what I thought about the movie, why I place it this far on the list, and moving forward, pretty much where we're going to take the direction of the show. So, I will, of course, in the description post what the ranking was for the previous 10, the miscellaneous cameos, archive footage, the made for TV movie, and the first two of the 72 official movies I've seen out of the 75. Of course, eventually I will get the DVD for Always Together, which will make it so that I've seen 73 of the official movies. But to my knowledge, and from reading various sources on the internet, nobody knows where to find a copy of the two movies, Body and Soul and The Devil with Women. If anybody can find them or knows where to get a copy, please feel free to comment because I would be very interested in seeing all of them someday. The only reason I decided to do this countdown without seeing them first is because it seems like nobody can see those unless they go to a museum which would have the original film reels. So, with that said, let's get into today's countdown. We're starting at number 70 with Swing Your Lady. Now, Swing Your Lady is a movie that Bogart absolutely hated doing, probably the least favorite movie of his entire career to make. In fact, he is quoted as saying he thought it was pure drizzle. The combination of wrestling and musical really just don't work very well for this movie. Now, at the same time, I actually liked Bogart's character in this movie. I thought he was quite funny and charming. I actually liked all his movies, even the ones that weren't as good as others and ones that he potentially hated. Just putting that on record. Now, what's interesting about this movie is it actually also features a notable cameo from President and actor Ronald Reagan very early on in his career. He has a small part as a reporter, but when you actually know it's him, it's very noticeable and kind of funny to see him there. Very young, start of his career. He's in a movie with entertaining, like, you know, wrestling and musical number, but Bogart's in it. So overall, I could see why Bogart hated making this movie. I don't really think it's one of his best. That's why it's at number 70. However, some parts were quite entertaining. I can't lie about that. Which is why I kind of put it a little higher up on the list than the previous two, which were Midnight, aka Call It Murder, and Holy Terror. The quality, because this is a later sound picture, is much better as well. So, yeah, 70, Swing Your Lady. 69, The Return of Dr. X. Probably the only real horror film that Bogart ever did in his career. Unless you count a later one down the list, which I would take as sort of a suspenseful horror thriller. There's also a few others that have that element to the genre, but this is a pure horror film. And this is one, like the previous one, Bogart hated making. Bogey really didn't like this one. In fact, he said something along the lines, and keep in mind I'm paraphrasing, but he said something that basically would suffice to say like this. He hated doing the movie. It was the picture that made him waltz into Jack Warner's office. president of Warner Brothers, and demand more money. They wanted him to play an undead guy who was a vampire who came back from the dead and had to drink blood to stay alive. That would have been fine for Bogart if it had been Jack Warner's blood, but unfortunately, they were drinking his, forcing him to make this shitty picture. Pretty much is what he said. Now, one thing I could say positively about this movie, it actually was better than I expected for the most part. And Bogart loathing and hating this character that he had to play plays it so stiff that it kind of works to help cement the character in the movie because he is an undead guy. He is a corpse, meaning his stiff mannerisms and everything coming off very cold natured quite work well for this movie. So even though he hated doing it, in my opinion, he still did a damn pretty good job, even though it was outside of his normal expertise of genres and what he specialized in. But I guess, that's kind of a testament of how good of an actor he really was. So that's 69. At 68, we have Love Affair. Now, this movie is an early one where he was typecast as the kind of tough guy boyfriend. He's basically building engines and he flies planes. The scenes where they're flying planes look really real, and it's very unnerving for a guy who's afraid of heights like me to watch because it makes my stomach roll over watching that because it looks really real and there's some pretty daring stunts that go on flying those planes. As the female lead experiences with her character when they're up in the air. Now, as I say, this is the example of a movie that the script, the story wasn't really the greatest, and yet Bogart was such a good actor that his performance elevates it from being a pretty average, not so good movie to a pretty decent movie overall by standards. And maybe that's just because I'm such a Bogart fan. I don't think this was by any means his best movie. It was an early sort of typecasting before he took on the gangster roles, where he was typecasted for a while. But overall, I think he did quite well, and that's what made the movie very memorable for me is how good of a performance he put on. The rest was kind of forgettable. So yeah, that's 68 Love Affair. For 67, Men Are Such Fools. Now, this movie was actually kind of a bit of a charming romantic comedy. Wasn't bad. Bogart was kind of typecast in one of those boyfriendish roles, which they often did early on. Um, Not really the type that gets the girl he wanted, which was a big issue he had. Now, with this one, the movie isn't that bad. It's pretty decent. It was a good example of sound pictures improving in quality. Priscilla Lane plays the main female. Wayne Morris plays the main lead male. And the way it seems like Bogart's almost gonna get the girl, but then she totally screws him over and forces him to go back with his ex, who's what the description calls a real vamp, and I would say that's an accurate description. um, it kind of pissed me off. I didn't like that. Like it kind of was like, okay, what the hell, lady? Like you're just playing games with everybody now, and the title is called "Men Are Such Fools." The men in this movie were definitely such fools. They were fools, and it was kind of annoying for me to see Bogart get fooled because I think for the most part he was actually being genuine. But that's the whole point of the story, and I kind of get it. At the same time, it was not particularly my favorite movie, and he really wasn't a lead character in it. So that's why I put it at 67. At 66, we have Thank Your Lucky Stars. Now, this movie actually is a monumental achievement for Hollywood as far as musicals go. It was the highest grossing movie and musical of the year. It was one of the highest grossing musicals of the decade because a good portion of the proceeds were donated to help with the war effort. Now, this movie had an all-star cast. When I say all-star cast, I mean you literally had all the biggest stars in Hollywood at that time. Betty Davis, Ida Lupina, um, all these big, stars in this. Some doing musical numbers, some just making small cameos, which is what Bogart did. And that's why it doesn't rank that high on my list, is because Bogart was literally in the movie for like 2 minutes. Now, at the same time, is it a great movie? Is it worth watching? Yes, because it's very funny. The musical numbers are pretty good. There's a lot crammed into that short movie. And overall, like the story premise is hilarious. Like it's a very well made movie. It was for a good cause, and the fact you see all these big stars making contributions, it's really wonderful. And the fact is, even though Bogart was in it for 2 minutes, he's frequently mentioned throughout the movie. So it's kind of funny that he is in it for like 2 minutes. In fact, he's not even recognized by the people as being Bogart in the scene he's in, which is kind of funny. But he's playing himself. Overall, very good movie though. Just not that much bogey, which is why it falls in at 66. But still a good movie and worth watching. 65, we have Bad Sister, one of Bogart's first roles, and it also stars, again, with same co-star as Call It Murder, aka Midnight, Sidney Fox, and this was actually Betty Davis's film debut as well. Now, Betty Davis does a wonderful job. All the actors are really good in this movie. Sasa Pitts, who was a silent film star, is hilarious in this. The little boy they got to play the younger brother, very mischievous. He's funny. The dad was very sincere, caring for his family. Um, Sydney Fox steals the show, which is why she got, top billing. And then Betty Davis, of course, I said was great. Bogart is actually very good for an early role in this one. Not like the biggest lead or anything in this movie, but as playing the con man who's becoming the romantic love interest of Sidney Fox's character. He's very charming, but he has this off-putting, shady quality about his presence that makes more sense when you get to the end of the movie and you see what he was really plotting and scheming all along. But overall, this is probably my favorite of the early Bogart movies. Like this one was quite well done. There is probably a few others maybe I'd rank a little higher overall as far as like the quality of the film, how good Bogart was in it, that kind of thing. But yeah, honestly, Bad Sister's a pretty damn good movie. So that's why I put it at 65. Next, at 64, we have Two Against the World. Now, Two Against the World is a very good movie. The story is great because there is a woman and a man about to get married. They're a young couple, and the woman's mother was actually acquitted for killing her previous lover in self-defense. And it kind of soured her reputation, so she got remarried, changed her name. She's kind of been trying to sweep the past under the rug because it would give her a bad image. The man, partner of the young woman, his parents are very uptight, very, popular socialites and whatnot. And then the radio basically that Bogart works at gets a hold of this story and starts telling the whole story. They also reveal during the broadcast at certain points that it is the woman who was remarried, and this starts to affect her daughter. The parents don't want the man to marry the daughter now. The mother gets so depressed she kills herself, and the father of the daughter too basically is forced to step down from his position at a big bank company or something, a big executive position. And Bogart has a very small role in this. He kind of just works at the radio station. But what I like is he gets so depressed when he realizes the guilt of the problems he's caused by helping to facilitate the story. He's getting drunk with his secretary assistant, and he basically, you know, starts standing up to the bosses and the higher ups and blames them and says, "This is your fault. You shouldn't have done this. You did this just to make money, just to get ratings, and look how you've destroyed this entire family. So for Bogart to really stand strong, stand up for morality and what's right, really alleviates his presence as a small role in this movie that's really what made it the best part of the movie. And of course, the story itself is quite good. But Bogart's being the only one, even though he's lower on the scale of command at this radio station, standing up for what's right, really made that a terrific role for him, especially early on in his career. Next, at 63, we have Up the River. That was actually the second movie Bogart did in 1931, I think. Yeah. And that one is the only movie he starred in with lifelong friend Spencer Tracy, who literally went to visit him when he was on his deathbed. They were lifelong pals. The only movie they ever acted in together. Now, Bogart plays, a guy who made a mistake. He's in sort of jail, juvenile detention center. He's getting out soon because he didn't really do that much. His parents think he's in China. He's really protective of his family, his mother, his sister, and all that. And of course, he met a girl while he was in there. They're both getting out around the same time, so they're going to get married and live a good life. Now, the jealous lover of the girl, before she went in, the girl tells him basically she's through with him. He doesn't like that. He sets out to make Bogart's life hell. He starts to do that. Spencer Tracy, who steals the show in this. This is one of the few examples where an actor actually has the starring role and like kind of steals the spotlight, and Spencer Tracy does this. One scene he's talking about the electric chair. It was crazy. And he basically, with another guy who's very dopey and dumb, breaks out of jail. They basically go to meet Bogart, tell him what this lover's planning to do. They basically get the money that he embezzled from Bogart's mom back for him, help him out, and then they return to prison where they're going to return to solitary confinement because they broke out, but they need them for the prison softball league, so they're allowed to play the game before they go. So it ends kind of happy. It overall, Up the River is a pretty good movie. You could tell the quality really wasn't good because they were starting to just get the hang on sound pictures at this point, but the story, the acting is all top notch, and it's a really incredible movie in that regard, which is why, especially for like Bogart's first, second role, about there in his career, it's at 63 because it really is quite an amazing movie and a real testament that right from the beginning, Bogart had that sort of magical star quality as an actor. Next, we have 62, Big City Blues, which is a very funny movie. It's sort of a dark comedy, and Bogart wasn't even really any like major part in this movie. He was a small minor role. He's not even credited in the top cast, but he just sort of appears at a party as one of the guests. He's kind of obnoxious, sarcastic. It's very funny. Ends up getting into a fight where this woman gets killed. It's this other guy who did it, but because they were fighting, it led to it. And even though he played such a small part, he really was very entertaining to watch in this role as he got drunk and got into the fight, and his sarcastic sense of humor really made him a standout. In fact, this is another movie he was in with Joanne Blondell, and she was very good in this movie. The male lead was kind of forgettable. Some of the other characters were funny and quirky, but considering Bogart wasn't even like a real starring role in this movie, he stood out because he really brought an entertaining presence, even though it was a minor role. That's pretty much as high as I could put it, though, because he wasn't really a lead or anything. But still, overall, to get 62 shows it's pretty good. For 61, the last in the countdown for today, we have Three on a Match, which also had Joanne Blondell and it had Betty Davis. Now, this is an early role for all of them. The two women I mentioned did an incredible job. All the females were great in this movie. The mother of the one child basically jumps out the window and commits suicide to save her kid's life. That was a very touching, deep scene. To see how they went from school to, leading different lives as they grew up as women, some successful, others not as much. Eventually, the one goes from not being as successful to being more successful. The one who was married wanted a more exciting life. She leaves it to kind of get in with the wrong crowd. Bogart plays sort of a henchman of one of the wrong crowd, and he's a very tough, intimidating, scary gangster, and he really commands respect. He's not the boss, but he's kind of like the second in command. And as a villain, he's very diabolical. He's ruthless. He doesn't have mercy for the kid or the woman. He's all about getting the money. And this guy that the woman fell in love with, who was mixed up with Bogart's crowd, owes them money. So they're trying to hold the kid as ransom because his father, the man that the woman left because she thought he was boring, is a big rich lawyer. And yeah, as you could tell, it's a pretty dark, tragic story. Overall, a very good movie. If Bogart had had a bigger role, I might have honestly put this higher. It's because his role just wasn't that big in it, but overall, he was very good in it, and all the other actors did an incredible job as well. So that's why three on a match falls in at 61. So now, before we conclude, I will review our countdown so far from where we've left off from the beginning, and we'll round it up and wrap it up. So, at 80, we had the TV version of The Petrified Forest, the live stage play adaptation. At 79, we had You Murderer You, which is archive footage to bring Bogart back for an episode of Tales from the Crypt. In 78, we had The Love Lottery for an uncredited cameo. For 77, we had Two Guys from Milwaukee, where him and his wife, Lauren Bacall, had uncredited cameos. In 76, we had Women of All Nations, which he did have a role in, but all his scenes were deleted for the final cut. For 75, we have Body and Soul, which I have not seen because it seems like nobody has a DVD copy or a downloadable, watchable version of this movie, which is the same with 74, Devil with Women. 73, Always Together. He has a small cameo on the TV as a crying father in a window. I could eventually get this on DVD, and I plan to eventually just to say I've seen it, but as of now, I have not. For 72, we have the start of the countdown, which is Midnight, also known as Call It Murder, when Bogart became a bigger star and they re released it. 71, A Holy Terror. 70, Swing Your Lady. 69, The Return of Dr. X. 68, Love Affair. 67, Men Are Such Fools. 66, Thank Your Lucky Stars. 65, Bad Sister. 64, Two Against the World. 63, Up the River. 62, Big City Blues. And 61, Three on a Match. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Countdown, and tomorrow's episode will feature the countdown moving forward from 60 all the way to 51. So we're getting higher up the scale into the better and bigger Humphrey Bogart movies. Hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I also hope you will stay tuned and check out tomorrow's episode. And keep in mind, we're still higher up in the list, so these are not going to be the most famous, well known, best Bogart movies, but all of them are pretty good in my opinion. I could honestly say I didn't see any movie of his that I truly despised or disliked. So I think that's saying something. It kind of cements what a cinematic and iconic legend he was as an actor. But, of course, the higher up we get in the list, the more you're going to start to notice the bigger and better movies. So it's worth staying tuned for that reason, if no other. Till next time, I'm your host, Super Kami Guru Alucard. Hope you enjoyed today's presentation and that you will come back tomorrow for the next 10 of the countdown. Till next time, Oyasumi Nasai, Matane, peace out. And here's looking at you, kid.